there's matching or other hackathon stuff we could still sneak into with Badger, I'm sure the community would be up for it. So I can ping you directly if you want to.
Yeah, ping me async. I've got as soon as I get done with this, I got a couple of fires to put out. My email address is john@ethdenver.com. So just ping me an email.
Sure.
At this point, all money that comes in, we're just going to put into the prize pool, and we also have a convertible seed grants round incubator kind of thing that we're setting up for like projects that we really like as a community. So we are
we're live actually, guys.
Going back like
sorry, technical difficulties fixed. We're live. Welcome everyone. Welcome back, party people, to the DAOhaus Haus Party. This is gonna be a fun one. We got a double header. Jon Poller and Jon Tompkins. I won't try to pretend it wasn't a scheduling kerfuffle on my part that we got both of us in, but luckily we have an hour, so we'll do it. Jon Tompkins is from BadgerDAO, and Jon Poller's here to talk about ETH Denver, also Opolis, I suspect. Thank you. Thanks everybody for watching, and thanks to the Johns for joining us. Since we got two guests this week, we're gonna go ahead and skip the DAOhaus housework portion where we sort of give you some updates on what we've been up to. I'll say most of the same updates are in the newsletter, so sign up for that bad boy, and you can catch up with all the same stuff and get the links to poke at what we've been building.
And hang with us at Denver. We'll be hanging around also, so yeah.
Exactly. Head to ETH Denver and hang out. Word. Cool. So do we want to do kind of one then the other, BadgerDAO then ETH Denver, or we can kind of
Can we do ETH Denver first?
Because I got at the same time.
Can we do ETH Denver first?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm busier than a three-legged badger on fire in a
Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't even schedule this weekly live stream properly, and you're doing a whole event. We only have like 7,000 people showing up. Right. So let's talk about ETH Denver. I guess start with just kind of the basic spiel for anyone that doesn't know what it is.
So the short version of ETH Denver is it was really hatched out of the meetup scene in Colorado back in the spring of 2017. We had 300 to 400 people coming to our Ethereum events with wait lists, and it was pretty crazy. So I get sort of bored with backslaps beer and talkie. So I threw around the idea to we always shield Colorado as such a great place to be and work and live, and we're gonna go build Colorado into this international hub for blockchain. We're gonna do that. So the idea was to build an event that actually took all the raw ingredients that we've got laying around and people that are interested and actually do something about it. So this was right on the heels of ETH Waterloo 1, which was in October, I think, of 2017, that we actually formally put our marker down. It was like right before that, we're like, hey, we want to do an event. Like, you guys want to help us? And they're like, oh, okay, kind of, maybe. And so we just did it. And I think timing was good in some ways, but I think it's largely a testament to the Colorado community and then also the larger Ethereum community coming around the event. And it ended up being 1,500 people the first year, 2,000 the next, just under, and then 2,500 just under last year. And then online, we're expecting, live stream unique visitors, we're expecting between 5,000 and 7,000 people. And for the hackathon itself, probably 3,000 people-ish or something that are going to be actually at the event engaging. So it's no small undertaking anymore. So we shall see how it goes.
Yeah, how's it been like obviously it's usually a physical event. That's always super awesome. We go every year. What were some of the things that changed in the process?
Yeah, so I'm getting a little lag on you, Van, but like I get
stuff truly, or is it harder?
Well, it's different, right? So, the pandemic has obviously put everybody into sort of like virtual mode. And what does that look like? So what we decided to do is essentially try to recreate as much of the event experience as possible. Right. So instead of saying, oh, well, we can't do an art gallery, we can't do the Zen Zone, how are we going to do that remotely? Like, we can't do sponsor booths. How are we going to do that? Well, instead of like accepting defeat, we basically recreated it all in a video game. And we have, a CryptoVoxels, like, artifacts of the metaverse art gallery with huge art auction happening with NFTs everywhere. We've got Zen Zone with guided health and wellness sessions, including yoga and meditation. We've got our makerspace with live art and maker demos, and the live stream, which is like 80 speakers plus from all over the world, talking about the latest and greatest of the Ethereum community. So, I mean, it's going to be different. Certainly, I don't think there is any replacement for the IRL, but I think as far as like creating a number one, a second best for what we can do. And then number two, in the long view, it's for us like, well, why not just run both concurrently for those that can come in person, show up and spend the money if you have the economic wherewithal. But this also creates a whole other vector of reduction of barriers to entry for those that can't get visas and can't afford a plane ticket or a hotel room or whatever. So our job is really priority number one, inclusion in the, for an on-ramp. We want to let people come, and it's always free. We don't charge anything for anybody to attend. And it's important that we preserve that ethos, and we just continue to build it. So weirdly, 2022 will probably be a hybrid of both. We're not going to just abandon ship on the virtual just because the pandemic's over or whatever. We're going to continue to invest in the community and give people optionality on how they want to participate. Personally, I think it's a much better strategy, even not one that we would probably necessarily have gone after had we not been sort of forced this year. But it's going to turn out to be a huge net positive.
I think it's pretty cool, or like the silver lining, I guess, of the whole COVID thing is that some of our like hyper local groups have now gone virtual, right? And we're able to expand. Check this out! I got the spoon here, but we're able to expand out in our communities into this like world stage a lot easier. So speaking of like local communities, you're in Colorado. You're a big supporter of all the crypto communities. Like you had open office for co-working space for blockchain people to just come hang out on Thursdays. With the COVID stuff happening, like how does that change things with like in that world? Or
well, it does change things. I think in the near term, it's changed things a lot. I think in the long view of it, I think we'll adapt once we get to a place where people feel more comfortable in socializing in person. Will it go back to normal? I don't know what that means. Like who knows?
The new normal.
Yeah, whatever the new normal is. Who knows? Like I don't know what that's going to look like. I think it's sort of a fool's errand to hang on to history and sort of be nostalgic about things too much. I think there's a big opportunity to, I hate the word reimagine, but sort of address how we define community, right? So communities are going virtual. If you think about it, what's really interesting about this, so if you think about geocentric affiliation with people, right? So my city, my state, my country, like all of these are sort of like, for all intents and purposes, it's forced on you because you're born into it and you don't have a choice. And one of the things that I'm sort of, you see this sort of emergent order of values alignment happening in the DAO space and in digital orgs and all sorts of other kind of, ways of connecting. I feel like I'm more connected to this ecosystem from a values perspective than I am with any of my neighbors. I don't even really have that much interest in hanging out with my neighbors. No disrespect to them, but like, my choice would be very different than what I was born into, right? So I think it's just a really interesting evolution of what even maybe the idea of citizenship would be. To be the digital citizen. Imagine instead of countries based on geography, imagine countries based on DAO affiliation. Like those are the kinds of things that I think about, where you can opt into the values and things that there is. So back to ETH Denver, like, the way I see it is ETH Denver, as much as it has a geocentric name, ETH Denver, we're a big fucking tent. Excuse my French. We are, we're a big tent with a blank canvas, So what we do is we just create a space for people to come and connect and express their creativity, build cool stuff, connect with, funding sources, investors, community, resources, team, whatever. We're just a giant blank canvas for people to just build really cool things. So I think ETH Denver, the name almost feels unfitting anymore, because it's not just about Colorado. Like, although there are some really interesting things that we're doing at the state level here, trying to make it, well, I just had a call yesterday with the folks at the state, and we're going to be talking about the first digital state. Well, the first digital state, in my opinion, don't tell them I said this, but is the steps towards really not needing the state anymore. In some ways, it's like now, things, right? There's a whole political landscape to that, and there's a whole nother podcast on that, right? There's a whole nother house party on that subject. But for me, it's like, the reason why we do it is because we enjoy seeing individuals have the opportunity to come and connect with their tribe. The people that come to the Ethereum community, they do it because they're intrinsically motivated to do it. People aren't here because they're just geeky on the tech. I mean, yeah, sure, some of that's cool. It's really cool, but it's the social impetus. I mean, just for example, my co-guest here from BadgerDAO, I mean, out of nowhere, I never even heard of it before until it hit the main stage, and like all of a sudden, it's like people are talking about all this, and the emergent order of this stuff. This has never been done. Everything's always been sort of permissioned to create these kinds of things. And now we're sort of, just doing it, and we'll figure it out, and the compliance and the other things, like, who knows? Like, there's a lot of just, evolving and moving parts and pieces that I think is great. And I think it's, the community that we're building here just continues to expand, and it's a global footprint. I mean, we're expecting people from 85 countries to attend ETH.
Yeah. Is this going to be the biggest ETH event ever, basically, because it's virtual?
I actually tweeted about this the other day, and I was talking to one of our stewards about that. I'm like, imagine thinking that ETH Denver isn't the biggest Ethereum event that's ever happened in the history of the whole project, and it is. I mean, DevCon's what, 4,000 people ish, something like that. So if we have 7,000 people participating, like from all the corners of the globe, like, that's insane.
Yeah. It's going to be, and like you said, it's going to be an experiment, right? So we'll see, like, how.
Well, and yeah, I think in terms of organizing systems and emergent order, DAO currencies and like I think we're super early still. I've been saying that we're super early for 4 years, 5 years, maybe longer. But like we're still really early. I mean, none of this isn't even. I mean, the closest thing that's hit mainstream is Bitcoin and Doge, with on the heels of like the GME thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say Wall Street bets.
Yeah, Wall Street bets made Doge. The people are paying attention to Doge only for that. Now, if that's your starter drug, and fine, go do it. Like I think a lot of us got involved because of sort of little hooks like that, so I think it's great. So,
and I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Like you were saying, one of the coolest things for me, and we see this a lot, like I've been living through my non-Web3 legal tech like side of watching this digital stuff hit that as well, and the number of calls where it used to just be within your jurisdiction or just within your federal jurisdiction, and now it's people from all over the place. And so people are calling in, that are lawyers in Africa, that are lawyers in Canada, that are lawyers, and when we try to tackle a thing like access to justice,
this is my point is the social signal is attracting people who share those values.
Right. And then people are able to say, well, here's how we do it in Canada. And they have a completely different, tack on certain problems in other places. And then the people from Africa are able to say, well, none of that works here. Here's what we need, and I feel like the same thing happens in, and it's different and broader in the Ethereum space. But like the idea of the diversity, I love conferences. It's great to see people in person, but I don't like the part where I have to travel there. And a lot of people, and I have the money to do it, and I don't like that I have to travel places. A lot of people don't have the means to fly a place, and then they're just sort of left out of the whole community aspect of a lot of things in the world. It happens in legal all the time. There's literally
100%.
There's a conference industrial complex in certain industries where, if you can't go to the trade show, you might as well not even try to be part of that industry, and it's not fair. Like, not everybody can afford to fly to Columbus, Ohio once a year and stay in the Hyatt and blah blah blah.
It's sort of the old way of thinking about community. It's the old way of thinking about how we connect and how we organize and how we socialize and how we resource and how we build reputation. Conferences kind of remind me of, in some ways, of Blockbuster Video's brick and mortar stores.
Yeah. Well,
it's like there's a whole new paradigm shift that's going to happen. I mean, the socialization element, the in real life component, I think is important. The thing about ETH Denver, though, is we've never billed ourselves as a conference. We're not a conference, actually. We're a fucking innovation festival. We're Burning Man meets Ethereum. We're like this weird sort of artistic expression, hackathon-y nerd buffacorn pajama pants wearing. What is that? I don't even know. And I don't care to label it. We call it a community gathering and innovation festival for a reason, because it's sort of abstract enough, but it kind of generally gets the gist across. It's like, okay, seems like that makes sense. But like conferences and suits and all this kind of stuff, type of like business compartmentalization and sort of facade building nonsense, like we all pretend to be somebody else at these conferences and all this. Right. It's all bullshit.
Don't wear my cool shoes.
It's like I have no interest in going back to another conference. Like I predict that, especially with some of the things that we've been experimenting with, like gamification, we got a whole in conjunction with POAP, we've created a whole game of unique NFTs that you can collect that are specific to the event. And some of them will end up being very rare. And at some point, it might actually be worth something. Who knows? But like creating new experiences, incentivizing people to like do certain things, but also receive value, both educationally, socially, and even economically. So creating the trifecta. Conferences don't do this. They're trying to sell you shit.
Right.
They're not about experiences and economic growth and community growth and educational growth and all that. They're not what? Like, and again, it's all game design problems. So like, it's not that, conferences are acting rationally, as if the conference could act rationally, but the participants certainly are. If they're trying to sell you stuff and that's their venue to do it, then let them do it. But I just choose to opt out. I have literally no use for conferences in the traditional sense.
So
that's part of the reason why we're bucking the system and doing this, because like I don't want anything to do with it.
Well, so maybe this is a good transition to talking a little bit about stuff with Opolis, because there's a meat space reality we all have to live in, right? Like, as much as my community is digital and I'm talking to people, all around the world every day in the different DAOs I'm involved in, I still have to pay taxes in California. I have to get my health insurance in California, right? Like
the harsh reality of the harsh alphabet soup reality is what I call it. The IRS, the Department of Labor, FLSA standards, ACA standards, compliance standards, like all this crap you have to do. And it's just like, well, that sucks. That's a total wet noodle at a party, like that's not fun.
Right.
But the reality is it's not going away. Okay. So like, if you look back at history, and so I'm a student of game design and strategy. You could call it even, I'm good at chess too. So I can anticipate moves.
War games?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of in a way. I mean, it's looking at the battlefield and making good decisions on, how do we affect the changes that we're looking to implement? But I'm not one to go carry banners and bark at people. I don't really think that does much. I think it's theater, if anything. But the reality is that we all have to pay taxes, whether we like it or not, unless you want to go to jail.
Death and taxes.
Or unless you want to go on the lam. And you're going to have to also think about your family and your health and these other things that we've somehow found ourselves 100 years past the Industrial Revolution age, still combining with work, So like we have these jobs, right, that supposedly provide all this stuff for us, and it's incredibly subjugated and paternalistic in nature, right? So the power distribution in the game design is bad. There isn't any sort of mutualism when it comes to like employer-employee relationships. The parent is totally the corporation, and you can be rah-rah, kumbaya all you want about your virtue signaling and ping pong tables and kombucha on tap, but none of that actually replaces freedom and flexibility. None of that replaces the ability to choose from, where, with whom, and how much you want to work. Now, if you look at the shift from W-2 employment and what's happening in the trends, by 2028, more people will be identifying as self-employed than are actually in the W-2 employment system. But we don't have ways to help people survive and manage this complex thing called employment on their own. Everything's designed for corporations with lots of bodies, right? So what about the individual?
Well, it's also worth calling out.
Companies won't touch you. PEO companies won't touch you. Nobody wants to talk to you because you're just one person.
Well, and it's worth calling out that, like, via legislation, the corporations are even pushing that direction, right? I mean, in California, they just passed a whole big law, controversial, about whether or not,
AB 5.
Yeah, about whether or not, Uber drivers and Instacart, shoppers and stuff are employees or not. And they're fighting about that because that distinction controls things like whether you have to give them health care or not, whether you have to pay them minimum wage, stuff like that, right? So the companies are actively fighting to have less W-2 employees.
Well, ironically, everybody wants the same thing, except the legislators are solving new problems.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, legislate it, regulate it. And it's like, no, how about this?
Well, I think maybe a thing to flag real quick for any international listeners is in the U.S., where we don't have socialized health care, our health insurance is tied to employment based on sort of the government's theory that, like, if you're a productive member of the world, you have a job. And so we want to promote that, so your employer pays for your health care. So the closest we get to having health care covered is if you have a full-time job with a corporation, you get a W-2, which is the tax form for your employment status, which means you're a W-2 employee, and usually that comes with health care, right? And I don't think it's serving us very well.
No, it's not. It's terrible. It's terrible. And then you have these really, really shitty pieces of legislation called the Unaffordable Care Act. Did I say that out loud? Unaffordable Care Act was supposed to be the Affordable Care Act.
At least you didn't call it Obamacare to just tread on racist.
Yeah, let's put it this way. It's a garbage piece of legislation that essentially doesn't solve anything, and it's made it incredibly expensive for independent people who are healthy and don't qualify for subsidies. So if you're a $120,000 a year software developer and you don't qualify for the state subsidies, you're going to pay through the nose, dude. And if you're over 50 years old, you're going to pay even more. So it's like you can't afford it. And then it's not even that. The coverage is terrible. It's not national plans typically. And then you got nobody to handle your back office, your business, any administration, accounting. What do I do if I want to pay myself in crypto? I don't know. Like, I got to track my basis statements and I got to do all this stuff. It's not easy to deal with. Okay. So what Opolis really is the bridge between Web 2 and Web 3.
So
Okay?
I guess last question on the same thing, like with DAOs and with these guilds, kind of flat orgs of a bunch of contractors kind of, or freelancers all coming together, all dealing with these same issues.
This is the thing with Opolis, they don't need to deal with these issues on the employment front because each individual can become self-sovereignly employed by themselves. So what happens is the DAO no longer has to figure it out because the DAO can basically just contract with this person as a 1099 if they want to do the tax forms at all. But from the person's standpoint, the person now is employed on their own. They'll recognize the revenue that they're getting from each of their DAO groups, and it'll all be funneled into one paycheck for them, or however they decide they want to set it up. But essentially, the DAO no longer has to solve the compliance of employment issue.
I think that's really cool, and it's going to be a really powerful tool, I think, for DAOs. And we're starting to see DAOs like have almost like salaried people that they're paying or streaming funds to because of crypto.
That's exactly right. So we already have people coming over from MakerDAO. We have people that have come over from FIO Protocol. We have people that have come over from other DAOs that are, they're like, hey, I'm DAOing it full time, and I don't know what to do. And the DAOs are like, well, we're trying to be a DAO, not a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's looking around. So this is where Opolis comes in because we're essentially the compliance layer that all the DeFi money Legos, all of the market Legos, all the DAO Legos can like sit on top of it compliantly. So all the alphabet soup agencies are happy. We check all the boxes. So when those folks come sniffing around, everything's above board, right? Hey, I take part of my paycheck in crypto. I opted into that, but here's how we're FLSA compliant. Here's what we do. And it's all, everyone's getting paid their tax man, right?
Yeah,
so
they pay the tax man, then they're cool.
That's all that this is about, okay? If you're paying your taxes, they don't bother you. It's all about taxes, okay? So the point is what we're doing at Opolis is making it easy for people to keep those people off their backs. Whether you're a DAO or you're an individual, this makes it easy because you can just point back to Opolis and we do everything by the book, right? But we're also integrating a lot of cool Web3 tech. So in the future, your DAO will just be integrated into the stack, right? So like all that streaming money will just come straight to your Opolis account, and you'll just be able to get paid, and then it just comes to your paycheck, and you can take whatever you need for your rent and your USD and keep the rest in a crypto IRA, the self-directed one, or whatever you want.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an important part of the DAO stack, of all those Lego bricks. We're going to need something like that.
You have to have it. I mean, that's the harsh reality of what we're doing is we're greenfielding into places that can get very dangerous with those that want to control what we're doing. And if you look back in history, the number one pinch that they get people on when they don't like what you're doing, you know what it is? Tax evasion. So if you're getting money coming down, that's what they get you on every time. Well, what do you think they're going after Trump for? Hell yeah, dude! They're gonna the tax returns is where they go. Show me a man, I'll show you the flaw. In terms of your tax returns, like you just don't want to give them a reason to come do that, right? So, look, 20, 30 years from now, maybe they won't be doing that, but they are doing it today. Okay, and the last thing we need is more FUD being slung around the industry that we don't take this seriously, right? Like, I don't mind paying the taxes if we can have a decentralized system in the future, right. And if we can do things better. We got to do things incrementally, though. We got to get there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we might as well just be efficient about things. So the really exciting thing that we're announcing at ETH Denver is the work token. So the work token is a rewards patronage token. So it's based in a limited cooperative association, is the actual legal entity that we use to protect benevolence on a legal basis. So the decentralized tech that we put on top for governance at scale will pair well with that legal framework because we have to use an EIN number for employment purposes. Like we can't be a DAO with no EIN number. We have to have that for healthcare. They won't give you healthcare insurances on a group plan without an EIN number, so you just have to have that. But we've gamed it and made it much better, so like it's sustainably benevolent. It acts like an employment DAO. It just has a legal wrapper. And
what if a DAO like filed a town charter though? Does it have to be an LLC?
Well, so the way that the laws work for co-employment is you have to have an LLC S corp in order to be bona fide employed. So the way that we get you in on the healthcare is through your vehicle that you own. Now, if
we made it a digital state and we could file a town charter, then maybe could we be employees of the
potentially? Yeah, I mean, that whole conversation is evolving.
Yeah,
right?
And that's a long conversation.
If you look at what Wyoming's doing and being able to like, sort of recognize DAO frameworks and all of this, like, yeah, who knows what's going to happen next? But essentially, right now, the real problem is healthcare plans, and legislation around PEOs require EIN numbers. So that's how they track the taxes.
That's
right?
employer identification numbers.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know.
Right.
Well, this has been super interesting, and we should do it again another time and really dive into some of this stuff. I know you're super busy, only launching the biggest ETH conference ever.
The non-conference, right? The community gathering and
the ETH festival, right?
Innovation Festival, yeah. So I will just mention one thing that I think is important. So obviously DAOhaus is part of the coalition, which is the Coalition for the Self-Sovereign Worker. And it's important to understand what this is and how important of an economic experiment this is, because the work token, we have essentially invented a process called payroll mining, which is a aggregated consumption mechanism that basically for all of the members of the commons, the employment commons, which is the LCA, we add up on a periodic basis the growth, right? As we hit certain thresholds of growth, work tokens are distributed to the commons members and the people consuming services, and also participating in referrals. So DAOhaus, for its referrals, for its members that come, will also be receiving work tokens. And those work tokens then are a unit of account that entitle the member to future profits in the cooperative. So this is all legal. It's all something, we had to think about how can we do this with a legal entity, like has an EIN number and all this, but how do we do this? So we're doing it through patronage, through the Cooperative Association legal framework. And, we're not going to sell any tokens. Now, that doesn't mean that secondary markets won't. We all know how that works. But like the value of the ecosystem is just going to continue to grow based on how many more members we have and how much more payroll is happening. So if you look at TriNet, which is the largest PO in the country, their market cap's like, $5 billion or something nonsensical for an archaic dinosaur. Okay. And think about what that would look like with 1 million independent contractors globally.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the value of that. I mean, it's sustainable because everyone has to run their paychecks. Everyone has to run everybody has to do this. So we might as well get, we might as well build the value for ourselves. Let's put it that way. Yeah. I'm a member. Josh is a member. Everybody, Bill's a member. Anybody who's on the board or anybody who's participating, we all run our payroll and paychecks through Opolis. I get my healthcare through Opolis. And yeah, more people come. We're trying to activate that network effect and really, give people the rails to go live this sort of Web3 world that they want to live. Now,
I think it's going to be really powerful and really a game changer.
I think it has the possibility to be, if the community circles around it and activates the network effect by referrals, which is the way that happens, it's going to go batshit. And here's the other thing that we back into, though, that I think is really interesting. If you go to opolis.co, you'll notice that there's not a lot of talk about crypto and blockchains and DAOs and all this, like, house party speak, right? Like, the average independent contractor sitting over at Microsoft doesn't know anything about any of this, but he knows that he doesn't have health care, and he knows that he doesn't, like his situation. And my God, wouldn't it be cool to have a little bit more variety and be able to work from where, with whom, and how much I choose? This is also the on-ramp for all of our friends, because it's that bridge, right? So not only does it help people already in the space become, legitimized and normalized and okay, it also brings a bunch of new people to the space because it's that bridge. They can elect cryptocurrency as part of their paycheck, where normally they wouldn't be going to an exchange or signing up for, Uniswap or whatever. Like, they wouldn't be doing that. But if I can just take it as part of my paycheck, yeah, I'll do that. I'll put it in an IRA. I'll do some of that.
Get some
there's
RenBTC or Badger.
Yeah, exactly. There's like these little subtle things that can happen that we can get all of these new people into the space with.
Kick ass. Well, like Deacon said, we'll have to have you back for a full hour when you're not planning the biggest Ethereum event in the world that kicks off tomorrow at the same time.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
And John, hit me up on email. I will be out of pocket here for a bit. I've got a few things I got to clean up and fix. Fire time, but then I'll get back to you and see what we can do.
Cool. Sounds great.
Good stuff.
Well, thanks, John. Party on.
Okay, guys.
Later, John.
Cool. So on to part 2 of the doubleheader. Does anybody need to take a break? I was used to. Yeah. Last time I went to a legit. I mean, who even knows what a doubleheader is in terms of terminology? I used the phrase off the bat the other day and was like, wait, that's a sports term.
Yeah, all over the place.
Baseball, especially. Yeah.
I always say on deck or up to bat. Yeah.
I don't even really watch baseball that much anymore.
Knock it out of the park.
Or Badger was a home run.
I never made it through a doubleheader. I was left after the first game, so I don't know. I'm weak.
2 points.
Anyway, we'll do it now. A word, John. Thanks for joining us, hanging out for the first chunk. So let's jump into your side. I mean, first, you want to talk a little bit about sort of your own background, like sort of before you ended up in Badger. I know it was kind of sudden in the last few months that Badger popped up, and you're like, I'm doing this thing now.
Yeah.
For anyone that doesn't know, John's my co-host. Or I should say, I'm John's co-host because he's the main driver of the bus. I just ask stupid questions.
Co's are equal.
Of a podcast called DeFi Download, where we talk about DeFi things each week. So check that out if you're interested. But otherwise, go ahead with your own story.
Yeah, apart from our sporadically consistent podcast. Yeah, so I guess pre-crypto, most of my career was spent just in fintech, largely working with hedge funds on order management systems, more on the deployment product management side. But I guess the more interesting bit was got into crypto, I guess, late 2016, really just from podcasts. I had a long commute for the first time in a long time after moving to California from New York. And was just crushing podcasts, came across Bitcoin, kind of dove in. So then I lasted about a year and a half. And then I just couldn't really do a normal job anymore, which coincided well with moving down to LA for my wife's job. So then I quit and went full-time crypto / dad, I guess. So that was, I guess, it'll be 3 years this summer, so I guess 2.5 years-ish. And was working with a DeFi project called Atomica for a while that were focused on some risk transfer type solutions. That project is still active. I'm not very active with it anymore. And then also other projects. I'm working on a project called Zero Confirmation, where it's focused on building with Ren, which is like an interoperability protocol for shifting assets across chain. So mostly it's used for bringing Bitcoin onto Ethereum in the form of Ren BTC. And then we built a protocol for trading and doing other things with Bitcoin on DeFi in 0 confirmations instead of waiting an hour. So that was kind of just some people from the Ren community. We started that up. That went live earlier this year. At the end of 2020, it went live on mainnet, and we're kind of looking for our next steps there. Really just use a lot of DeFi things in Metacartel and a few other random DAOs, and then really just use as many of the products as I can. And then really came across Badger, I guess, late summer. They were kind of coming out of stealth a bit. They've been building for a little while, and then came across it through the Ren community, just started contributing. It was while I was kind of winding down some activity with Atomica, and then really just kind of kept contributing and more. And then it launched and it really caught on, and then there was just a lot to do. And me and some other folks really just kind of went ham on it, just kind of grabbing things and tackling them and trying to get stuff stable. Fortunately, like all the contracts and all that stuff have been very good and secure, and no one's lost any money. But like, the UI, there were a lot of like UI issues. There was, getting people coordinated. There was, other, the APYs looked off, like all this other stuff. They realized when, okay, we went from, now you've got a couple thousand people trying to use this, thing out of nowhere. People have money in it. Now we've got, dozens of people kind of helping as part of the quote unquote team. Like, okay, now what do we do? How do we move forward? So that's kind of my history up to now.
It was kind of the whole BadgerDAO meme, first of all, is awesome. Just the little badger head. I love that guy. But it was probably like around Christmas, right? And you guys did a airdrop out to like people that are active in the Ethereum community. And actually, I don't know what were the airdrop stipulations. Like, how did you determine who got what?
Yeah, so there was a number of things that were decided before I even got involved, and we had some input, I guess, like the community did. But and that's what's kind of interesting. Like it's been interesting to be through kind of the emergence of a DAO, but I'm not a founder. I was just a community member, and now I'm a more active participant, and quote unquote core member, or whatever term you want to use. So the airdrop was really determined ahead of time, and that was by the founders that are that were there and built the thing and paid for it to get built and put their time in pre-launch. And I think the goal was, okay, how can we get as many like-minded folks together as we can? So who do you want? You want good community members that are going to support the community, people that are building in Ethereum and DeFi that can help kind of support the project. So it went to people that have voted across different DAOs, and went to people that had contributed via Gitcoin, and went to people that had, BadgerDAO, the stated purpose is like bringing Bitcoin into DeFi. So, at its surface, it's not a huge thing, but there's a lot you can do with that. And I think it's been a good focus from the beginning about being collaborative. So, there's different projects that they even collaborated with before launch. It's like a fork of Urin's vaults, and doing some changing, but it's not like, they're trying to fork Urin and take things. It's, we're looking to be productive. Similar, got a lot of inspiration from Harvest Finance, but then we set up a Harvest Finance vault that farms the farm token from Harvest, but instead of like a lot of vaults, it would take that and just sell it back for the native asset to juice the yield. It holds it, and then you distribute it to the people that have contributed, and we're still working on getting it distributed properly. But it's, there's a bit of I guess the change was a little bit focused more on like collaborative composability versus like, okay, we can go farm your contracts and get higher yield and get all the TVL.
With the collaboration with like Bitcoin, I think it's really cool that this is kind of like probably a lot of Bitcoiners' first, taste of Ethereum or whatever. Have you noticed much of that at all? Have you noticed like people being like maybe converting from Bitcoin maxis to being like, well, maybe there is something to this DeFi thing,
Yeah, I don't know, and maybe it'll happen more when, like, one of the things we have coming will be, first it's just going to start off with, come here to shift your Bitcoin to RenBTC and get it onto Ethereum, and then you can use it in one of the vaults. So that'll be kind of step one, and then we'll then layer on, okay, come here with your BTC and go straight into one of the vaults. So like I think that might be where we see more of that. And even with, we're looking for, it kind of did overlap pretty well with zero confirmation, because we're actually pretty much focused on speeding up and just making the experience of bringing Bitcoin into Ethereum a lot faster and better. So if we can, built into that, we even have like what we call gas as a service, where you don't even need to hold ETH. And like we start layering these things together a little bit, I think we can get to kind of the point where, okay, you don't even have to, like, just think of like Ethereum as your high yield checking account. Like you don't have to hold another asset. You can only have price exposure to Bitcoin. You can like put it over here and earn high yield. Yes, it's stored on Ethereum. So I guess if you have security concerns, that's it. But like you don't necessarily have to like hold ETH for gas. You don't have to, you have a decent deposit experience. And then you can, reap the rewards of, being in DeFi, which is, a lot higher APY than you're going to get anywhere centralized.
Right. You can always put that yield right back into Bitcoin if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things for me is there's been this separation forever of like, oh, Bitcoin's over here and it does its thing, and then Ethereum is this thing, and then some of the other ones that have their own chain, like XRP, whatever. Like it. I've always had this, like, there's the technologist part of me that's always standing like above watching all of these things and going, I don't understand why this doesn't eventually all converge into one thing. Like the technology is not that divergent. And so, you have your Bitcoin blockchain, and it's really good at what it does for confirming, transactions and mining, providing network security, et cetera. Like, but it's limited in doing the other things. And it's exciting to me that it's starting to happen, right? Like if Ethereum is becoming the layer for doing those yield type things, like that's a perfectly good thing for Ethereum to be for. And the people that, I think a lot of people that are working on Ethereum probably also have a hoard of Bitcoin, and mine just sits there. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I guess I could, BlockFi maybe. Like there are some emergent solutions for like, I could get some, some juice on that, but like,
yeah, the reason I really liked it was that, so I had some Bitcoin and I was like, once you have Bitcoin, there's not really anything you can do with it. And I like to be more like actively participating with my finances. So it's like, okay, cool. Like I know I have some wallet that's been sitting, or like a seed phrase or something locked away that like I haven't been able to do anything with this. And it's almost like I forgot it exists. So now I can actually do something with it. So I'm really stoked that there's a RenBTC.
And it's all about being productive. So, we kind of have goals of being like uber productive BTC. So right now, like, okay, if you wanted to get it into a Badger vault, like it's not easy and it ain't cheap. You gotta get your BTC shifted into RenBTC, which has fees and gas and yada yada yada. Then you have to take that to Curve and deposit to one of those vaults, which is definitely not cheap, and withdrawing from it is extremely expensive. So you need to take that into account with any yield you're going to earn, but then you need to take that over to Badger and then deposit to one of the vaults. You can earn some APY, and then you can stake that and earn more Badger. So that's like a lot of steps. There's time costs, there's gas costs. So we're looking at ways to kind of get rid of the gas costs, or we're looking to get rid of staking. We're looking to do the zaps, so you can get rid of that like time cost, so you can like zap right into a position and into an asset that's just kind of continually growing in its price relative to Bitcoin. And then we're all looking to even package those and create more of like an index that'll kind of spit out a what we're going to call like BBTC, which will basically be like an interest earning Bitcoin analog on Ethereum. That kind of is a rough approximation of all the the yield across the different like Bitcoin vaults. So like it's a ways to get there. But that, what you're talking about is exactly like I think what people love. I mean, just us talking here, a lot of Ethereum maximalists or the people in the loudest people in the space will be like, oh, Ethereum's like the money, it has a higher monetary premium. But I think a lot of us are like, I love building in DeFi, and I think Bitcoin currently right now has the best monetary properties of any current crypto asset. So I'm also going to hold that, and I like to use both.
Mm-hmm.
And I can hold ETH too and do stuff with that. So
with all the fees and everything, have you guys explored side chains like Matic, XDAI, or L2 solutions or anything like that?
Yeah, we've definitely talked to a few. I think there's some discussions, but it's tough with a project like Badger because it's all built on composability, right? So it's like at its core, the core product is just you deposit to these vaults, and then we call them sets, and then they take those assets and they go over here and do something with them and earn some yield. Now, if you want to be okay, let's go do that on layer 2. You kind of need that other infrastructure there first to then go get that yield. Now you can just bring the assets over there because all the vaults are just represented by an ERC20, and you can move those around and do whatever you want. But it's like this. Yeah, I think all of the L2s, it's like a chicken and the egg thing. It's like, well, you need the yield before the money comes, but it's hard to get yield without money. So I think we would totally like for that. And I think there's, looking into solutions where, and I'm pretty close with the Ren team as well. Like, okay, could we shift Bitcoin directly to XDAI or to an L2 to where you're just skipping the Ethereum step and then getting exposure to things over there, or maybe even you're just minting the interest earning Bitcoin on Ethereum in bulk and then moving it over there into an L2. And then, people are paying a little bit of a premium to buy it over there, but they're saving on gas.
Right.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think we'll see. There, the liquidity is kind of the issue on side chains, but we'll see as time goes, and as more projects and more of these composable aspects happen, if that liquidity is able to move a little easier.
So to back up from the specific project and BadgerDAO and stuff, right? I think we'll put in links, and Jon's on Twitter if you have specific questions about BadgerDAO and how to get involved, etc. there. But yeah, I think like one of the things we've been promising as we've hyped this episode for the last week or so is this sort of broader conversation just about DeFi and DAOs in general, which is a thing that you and I talk about a bunch on the podcast, since you're kind of the DeFi guy and I'm kind of the DAO guy, I guess. One of the ways we say it on DeFi Download occasionally is what our DAO is DeFi, right? And I think like the reason we say it, or at least I say it that way, is it's easy to look at the DeFi projects and the DeFi sort of protocols and products, etc. And then a lot of them spin up DAOs to do like governance things, but there's still this idea that the two things are a separate deal, and that's kind of not really true, because at the core of a DAO is the control of your. It's all about coordinating your collective bank, right? So in that sense, it's decentralized finance, but it's kind of more like a decentralized checkbook than it is some project that's going to be this like crazy yield earning, whatever. That said, there's no reason you couldn't have a yield earning layer for your checkbook. That would just be a collectively controlled checkbook, right? I mean, that's how real checkbooks work. You're earning interest.
You're 0.1% or whatever.
But like the place to maybe back up to here for people that haven't heard it from you already, Jon, it's kind of just like, I've always appreciated your definition of DeFi versus some of the, protocol maxis or whatever you want to call them, right? You're not real DeFi. Right. Like,
yeah, it's just the same thing as like Bitcoin being like, you're not really decentralized, or you're not really yada, yada, yada. It's like, it's just a term, and it's not even really a great term, but it's probably going to stick. It's catchy. But it's all about, censorship resistance, trustlessness, et cetera. And that's what this infrastructure allows you to do, what you do with it. And inherently, what's this good for? Like the transfer of value, whether the value is like a piece of art, whether it's information, whether it's, you know, the balances in a shared account, whether it's yield on some asset or a specific, you know, specific asset itself. Like your ability to interact with the protocol and no one to stop you from participating within the rules that are set, and is what constitutes DeFi to me. So basically everything on Ethereum is DeFi in my opinion. That's what got me, like, that's kind of like when I first came across Bitcoin, like I just saw it as like, wow, this substrate where you can have proven scarcity, and the scarcity is just a rule. So it's really just a decentralized way to set rules that everyone can see and validate themselves and say we're all playing on the same playing field. And you can set rules that create a Ponzi scheme. You can set rules that, you know, disenfranchise every Ethereum address that has a 3 in it. Like you can do that, and they can people can choose whether or not to interact with it. It you know, it doesn't matter. And like when I saw Bitcoin, like that's what I thought. And you know, coming out of the working in the hedge fund world, I was on site at hedge funds through the 2008 financial crisis, and the years before that, and the years after that, and just watching, they were all super high, you know, leveraged, and then no one really knew whose positions were what, and then they all just blow up, and that just kind of all, once enough of them blow up, that flows to the investment banks, and it flows to the insurers, and yada yada yada, and then they get bailed out by the government. And then everyone that was at the hedge funds that I was working with, they lost their jobs. They all got new rounds of $50 or $100 million funding to launch a new fund, and like everything just kind of keeps going around. Like, well, this system doesn't seem very good. I would like something that's a little more transparent. Like I saw how the sausage was made there, and I wasn't a big fan of it. So that's where DAOs kind of fit into it. Is like, I think, you know, I'm of the opinion now, and one of my kind of goals, I guess, going forward is like, how can we launch like 1 million DAOs of one type or another, and just get people iterating and finding like the right ways to create kind of open structures, and until we find something that works for all these different kind of solutions. So that's my high level DAO DeFi rundown.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
I saw a post the other day that said why Wall Street Bets is a hedge fund. And I thought, and then they called it something else. They called it like a crowd fund or something, but that's terrible because that word is already a term of art for funding projects. But like, are there any DAO like hedge funds yet? I mean, because that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Just this decentralized organization of people that have coordinated on Wall Street Bets. I mean, we literally covered this in the last episode of DeFi Download. The question, like, is Wall Street Bets a DAO? I mean, sort of in a sense it is. It's decentralized. It's not like running smart contracts. So in that sense, it's not autonomous, but like also no individual member has much power over what it does other than, you know, shouting ridiculous, sometimes tasteless things on Reddit.
I mean, DAOs are just, you know, a representation of corporate structures or whatever. So like, yeah, I mean, hedge funds, how they're usually structured, you have investors, and then you have like the portfolio managers. Maybe there's one person at the very top that's kind of has more control, but then you have portfolio managers making either suggestions or direct decisions on how to manage that money for different parts of the fund. Traders execute. Money comes in. There's, you know, reporting rules. You have to do all this accounting, yada yada yada. So, you know, it's not particularly different than, you know, a DAO where, okay, we're building this piece of software, and like, you know, we have a designer that does this, and so does this, and then other people can come invest, and or put their money in the treasury, trusting the team to do it, to operate, you know, in some way. Where, you know, if a hedge fund starts doing things they're not supposed to do, like, you know, I had clients that got arrested because they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. Now with DAOs, instead of getting arrested, you can get like forced rage quit or whatever in Moloch land. And I think maybe the thing I think would be interesting if we want to, that was like the high level DAO DeFi thing, but I think the more specific thing for where we are with Ethereum is there's DAOs that are like Moloch DAOs and, more heavily structured things that are on Aragon or wherever. But then you have these DeFi DAOs that are out there now where it's mainly a multi-sig and off-chain snapshot voting. And the idea is that like those votes from snapshot instruct the multi-sig owners to do certain things, but they still can do literally whatever they want. It's like they just have their reputation on the line, and you have to trust, some portion of them. And like that's where I feel like the gap is right now. It's like, and I don't know, I'd be interested to hear your guys' opinion on kind of what you think when you see these, heavily capitalized quote unquote DAOs that are really just multi-sigs with, good instructions, I guess.
Yeah, one of the things that we're working on now is actually adding to Gnosis Safe, we're adding a Moloch module where it's and so like we'll see if communities start to kind of feel the same way you're feeling, like, okay, this 3 of 5 multi-sig or whatever it is really the owners of it, and they really are. They're the ownership of everything. They can do
final decision making.
They can, they may have minting rights on the contract. They may have rights just to rug pull everyone and go to their own private island. But if you can actually add a DAO as a signer onto one of those multi-sigs, then it creates where the community is more involved because they're actually a member of the Moloch. At least you can expand out that core team to more than what's manageable with the multi-sig, which really, like, at 10 signers you're kind of screwed. But yeah, so I think we agree with that it's like for it to really be a DAO, a multi-sig and off-chain voting is not really enough.
Well, it's what we've been spending a lot of time on, and one of the things I've been working on is just how do you even get feedback from the community and get them to weigh in on a decision? Like, which decisions do we as the core team kind of say, hey, community, what do you think about this? Like, what parameters should we use? Should we even do this, period? You also need to figure out the flow of like information from the community up to like there has to be some validation for the team that's working on it. Like, can we even do this? Is it technically feasible? And then, figure out a way to then regurgitate that back out and say, hey, here's a framework for like a decision to be made. And then some of those need to happen every week. Some of those, some of these decisions need to happen, very rarely. And, one of the things that just, I think was just released by, in a blog post for Badger is kind of like the steps towards decentralization, where we're gonna have different multi-sigs for different things that have different controls. So there's like one for, where we can just like basically pause all deposits and withdrawals. Like, you can't take the money, but you can pause all deposits and withdrawals. And we have like a security team that has access to that. But then we have, a different group that's, handles, every week we have to set the emissions for the week. So like, what are the emissions to the different vaults going to be? And we're working on to make that more parameterized. But like, maybe that's not something that you want to have a DAO weigh in on, or if it's something that has to happen more often. It's like, you got to get all these people to come vote, but like, for major decisions, yeah, totally. Like, let's get, way more people weighing in on it and voting and being more in control of those, of the code itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think one of the problems with DAOs is they're super expensive right now on mainnet. I mean,
yeah.
And so the off-chain voting, I mean, a lot of proposals are just dumb, or they shouldn't pass, and no one wants them, and we shouldn't pay for gas for those. So another thing we were talking about is kind of this idea of a double tap proposal where, if an off-chain vote passes, then it could go to an on-chain vote just to be ratified, basically. But you don't have the no votes don't make it to an on-chain proposal. Only the ones that seem like they're going to pass are going to make it to on-chain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another kind of what might work. I think a lot of like government agencies use it, but that again, like kind of slows things down. Like if you're trying to have all the admin functions over a contract, and then you're waiting for a voting period to happen, that can be, or some quorum, then that could be a problem. But I guess with quorum, you could get through faster. I mean, that's what a multi-sig is, right? But if you're waiting 2 weeks for a voting period and you need to pause a token because of some exploit or something, then that's a problem.
Yeah, it's been interesting talking with you about, sort of I think particularly your approach. I mean, coming from, traditional banking and stuff, like as much in the decentralized space as we like to hate on certain aspects of, like, I mean, even what happened recently with GameStop, right? Immediately there were conspiracy theories about why Robinhood shut down trading on those on GameStop and some of these other stocks. 2 days later, when they did finally write up their post about what actually happened, like, it turns out it's actually legitimate. They were undercapitalized for what they were required to have by the government, basically, in order to,
I don't know about that, though,
be able to back. Yeah, I mean, it's fair. The conspiracy theory.
Why did every trading platform do it at the same time?
Because it's it's the government's requirement for the insurance that they have behind their accounts and stuff, is my understanding. But like, that part aside, right? I mean, that's the thing that has to happen sometimes, right? So, you're right. You can't have a 2 week. You can't have a 2 week. Well, yeah, because like.
Well, so you're talking about emergency rep cords that are like, so you're talking about just major downsides. So let's say you take it at face value, Robinhood would get in like super regulatory hot water if like they had let it happen, like trading continued to happen. Yeah. You need people to do that. I would say our goal, like, so there's another step in the process before, and this is kind of, I think, pretty standard across a lot of the DeFi DAOs, is we have an open forum where it's through discourse or whatever, where we put in improvement proposals that do get moderated through the core team to make sure it's not all just like bullshit. But anyone can put one in, and then we actually have like surveys on that, and like, we're not validating people are real. It has nothing to do with the token, how many people hold the token. So it's really open. It could be, it's not like, definitely not the best system, but we use that to put forth a proposal with all the information on it. And then you can put polls in there for like, okay, here's some parameters and some yes and no's. And then, people can comment on it too. And then usually there's a period of time where that's out there, get the comments, maybe you edit it a little bit, and then you take the survey results, and then you kind of come up with okay, based on all of this is the thing that we're going to do with these parameters. Then you put that in the snapshot, and by then it's probably mostly been given the thumbs up. So in case, but this also go through a vote from Badger token holders in the snapshot. So that could vary based on, a number of different parameters for why that might be different than what happened in the forum. But the goal is like, okay, make all of those yeses. so you don't run into, bad putts. But it's a lot of work. That was like December was us trying to figure out even just like how to get BIPs through and structured to not be like complete horseshit, where it's just like, hey, we're doing this, yay, nay. And then you just tell everyone like, hey, vote yes. And then, go that way. Like, we want to provide, counter arguments to things and appropriate models for why these are good parameters, yada yada yada.
It's an interesting ongoing sort of DAO thing where I think you have to figure out what works for any given community. But the reality is, like, people like to complain about stuff they don't like after it's happened, but they don't necessarily like to engage in the decision making up front. And part of that, my theory is partially that has to do with like how our judicial system works, right? Like, we just kind of do what we want, at least in the US, and then we sue people after the fact. And so everybody's kind of used to not just going about their life, but then maybe having to take action if a thing they like doesn't happen. I think it's also why our democracy is such a clusterfuck, because like nobody has this idea of needing to be engaged with the decision making. And so you kind of have this thing where like most of the projects I'm in have defaulted to Moloch DAO because it favors laziness, right? Like unless you are proactively against a thing, it tends to pass. That doesn't work in every context, and I think BadgerDAO is a context where that wouldn't necessarily work. That would open up an attack vector for the kinds of products that you have, you know, and so like you
and I think
have to-
Molochs are tough at scale. Like, you know, we have 8,000 token holders now. Do we get full participation in votes? I don't know. No one's actually done the breakdown on the voting. But, you know, there's a few things that I think we are trying to do that's a little different and new that I think will hopefully help us move towards decent governance structure. You know, we're going to adjust how the rewards are distributed in a way that I think will incentivize people to consolidate their Badger and other deposits into one address, because we're going to be doing basically your Badger deposits relative to your Bitcoin deposits compared to literally everyone else, and then rank everyone, and then if you're at the top you get like a 3x multiplier on your rewards. So like you want to have all your Badger in one spot. So now we can kind of say, okay, well, we have a little bit of a Sybil resistant mechanism. And then we want to have token voting, and you know there's whales that are out there. I'm open to we haven't put forth a proposal at all, but I'm open to doing like a sort of applying a route to the vote. We're going to be including active Badger. So if it's productive like Badger, so if it's, you know, used as collateral in different platforms, you know, including that in the voting. So I think that'll kind of help a lot.
I think what we might see
so,
with these DAOs over time is kind of like how public companies, how the ownership works in that, where you have different types of share, or, you know, like one type of share that has governance rights, and then another one which you're a holder, but you maybe you have signaling power, but not necessarily direct governance, which kind of would work with Moloch, like the core holders being actual members, which may not be all 8,000 holders, but all the holders would still have signaling power to try to like signal to these people how to act. But I think it does come down to like the real ownership, who owns it, you know.
And it's you know, this is a process. Good.
Oh, well, earlier you said you had like you guys were talking about having like the multi-sig for like these like and then just having like the security people managing that, you know, for like high security decision making. I think that's really cool, and like you know, and I think a community would typically delegate to security experts to make those decisions, right? Like that makes sense, but as long as the community has a means to like delegate people into that group and remove people from that group, it might be fine. And then you can have like these quicker acting groups that are trusted by the community. Like I'm not trying to have governance on security decisions. I'm a designer. You know, like, but I do want to make sure that I have voice in who gets to be in that security team, you know, or whatever, you know, like in whatever kind of like group it is, I guess, basically, as long as everybody has a voice to like put people places or remove people places or leave themselves if they don't like what's happening. I think those are some core things.
I think I mentioned it to Kurt before, but I've kind of got this. I mean, I think we're a ways away from this being like doable or really just efficient. But the way I kind of think of it is, even you could have like, you know, if you have thousands of token holders, you could have millions of token holders down the line, right? Like if things continue to grow, like, okay, what, like you don't want them weighing in on every little decision. But like you said, like if they can kind of control the teams, so token voting makes sense to me at scale, and you can have whatever mechanisms within that you want, rooting or, you know, including whoever. But then the actual operation of things, and that what I think is like that org could just basically control like the budget and some general feedback, and then that budget, but it's budget per sub organization. So you have the operations team, you have like dev, and then you can have like security team, and they just control who's getting funded and what control that team has over whatever. And those sub orgs could be either multi-sigs or Moloch DAOs themselves, right? And then, because like, you know, we're going through like working on compensation right now, like, you know, the core people that are going to be kind of more salaried or whatever, it's a smaller number. But as that grows, like the token holder shouldn't be saying yay or nay on these 100 people whether or not they should get paid XYZ. It's like, okay, you can fund an org, and then that org then handles the funding themselves. And then if there's issues with how you think that there can be, token holders can do their own oversight. It's all on chain, whatever, you can all be public. And then if they have issues with how an org is handling things, they can either, I guess, pressure them to remove somebody, or they can just say, hey, this other org is going to start up, this other DAO over here. Maybe there's some overlap in the other people are not, and we're just going to start funding them for the next quarter.
Yeah,
That's kind of a thing in my head, but it's like way out, obviously.
Yeah, and I still think there's like that initial, with token holder governance, there's that initial like barrier, which is like anybody can just go and buy the token and immediately have governance, which is a weird thing because like they've proven nothing. They've proven no knowledge, no loyalty, no anything, but different kinds of systems, like 2 token systems, where you can buy this token, but you have to stake it over time, which generates a governance multiplier off of this other token, or for example, so nobody can just like buy this governance token, but you can buy the token that can earn you governance if you participate with that token, or like shit like that, or like some kind of experiments like that are going on right now, which are pretty cool. But yeah, there's still like that. I feel like that's still like a thing. Like token holders can't just have like immediate governance based on a token that you can buy, because that doesn't make any sense anywhere in anything, unless it's
Well, then you can like you get a governance tax
or something. Like it's a Doge or something. I don't know.
Well, then eventually we put Badger on gets an Aave or whatever, and then if there's a whole bunch of it in there, someone can borrow a whole crap load of it and vote.
Yeah, even that, exactly.
So I agree, and there's things we're looking to that, like kind of looking at time components, but
like if governance was on the B Badger or whatever, like then that's something, because they've like proven some work, they've like staked, they've earned some yield, they've like contributed liquidity, they've done fucking something for the community or the project. Right, it'd be cool.
And that's how we did the dig airdrop, was really focused on that. We had a number of metrics I won't get into now. It was my Google Sheets would just have a complete seizure every time I made a change to it. But that was one of the things I drove, was determining like, okay, how should we airdrop it to these people? How do you determine who are like good badgers, but then not disenfranchised? Like if you have a whole crap load of money and you're a whale, and you have it all in the system, but you're also staking a bunch of Badger, like that's great. Like, we shouldn't fully disenfranchise whales. You need them too. But if there's someone else who has a whole bunch of money and they're just farming and dumping it, like, okay, I appreciate your money that you've deposited, but like, we're not going to give you much dig because we don't think you're going to be supportive of it. So just, it's been cool to be able to try some different things and get, I guess, real world feedback on it. And, we'll just got keep cranking it out.
Yeah, Dig's super awesome too. I mean, when did that come out as an idea? Like not like what, like a couple months ago or something maybe?
Yeah, so Dig was actually Chris Spadafora is the founder. There were a couple other guys that were founders too. So Dig was actually the initial idea. They were like, hey, let's do rebasing Bitcoin. A couple of them, I guess, had the idea. But then I guess when they thought it through, they're like, well, it would be very hard to do it on its own. Like you need like a support structure for it to make it more stable, because you can do different things. Like we're going to come out with the emissions for Dig going out to the different deposited sets will actually be based on the peg. So if it's below peg, if you're in the Dig set, you're going to get more Dig. If it's above the peg, then Bitcoin sets will get more Dig every day. So there's stuff we can do. We have all this money in there. We can kind of like there's TVL, and then there's also the emissions we can use to kind of help push it back. So that was the initial idea, and then they said, okay, well, let's launch the vaults, and then we'll do the Dig right after it. So from day one, it was like, okay, let's get Dig out, and that's why a lot of what I worked on initially, and like the airdrop was a whole thing. So it's like, hey, everyone, here's $30 million or however much it was at the time. I don't know, it was a lot, but
and if all the stuff that Jon just threw out made no sense to you, rebasing, TVL, all that kind of stuff, listen to DeFi Download, because we try to explain it a little. No, it's perfect. It's a great plug for my other product, so I'm not complaining.
Synergy.
Anyway, we should wrap this bad boy up. The doubleheader.
Composability, as you say.
Before we've overstayed our welcome at the house party, and the host is just sort of, like turning off the lights and the music and giving us cues that it's time to be out.
That's always the best part of the house party, the after party.
True. I mean, did you hang out for the hour, 2 hours after the one with Aaron? That was great. Just talking about the uncensored conversation about the downfall of American democracy. Anyway, if you want to come to that house party, you got to be on Discord. That part of the house party, you got to be on Discord. Otherwise, thanks everybody for joining us. Like and subscribe on YouTube, all that fun stuff. And thanks for joining us, John. And thanks for hanging out through the sort of the scheduling kerfuffle, etc. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks, man. Party on. See you.